Even once the ban was lifted, female players still struggled. Their game wasn't regulated until 1983. The first National Women's Cup was not until 2007. Dilma had a modest career as a player in one of the first professional teams for women. After retiring from playing in 1995, she moved into coaching. She led the women's national team to victory in the seven-side World Championship in 2019.
Ainda temos a resistência da sociedade. There's still this resistance from society. Don't say that everything's fine. I always say to women around me, don't let go of my hands because while we can't do it alone, we always did. To make it happen, we need people who believe in the dream. I want to thank the people who did not let go of my hand, who made me believe that we can make a difference to society, that we can make football different. Documentary at bbcworldservice.com or wherever you get your BBC podcasts. At bbcworldservice.com, people fixing the world with Myra and Nubi.
We're looking at clever solutions that are improving mental health care. We visit a 911 emergency call center in America and find out about a special kind of vitamin in Denmark.
Next, it's Unexpected Elements. This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Reducing its air miles, if only to avoid a painless 16,000 kilometre round trip each year. Stay tuned to find out why one bird doesn't just put its wings up and stay at home. And from moving animals to moving land, or at least rights to it, we talk about Moonbirds Day. Also, is the grass always greener? Highgate crashed the Wimbledon tennis tournament to ask about the science of the perfect football pitch. That's coming up shortly.
President Biden has attempted to put his re-election campaign back on track with a defiant rally in the US state of Michigan. He came out on stage in Detroit to chants of "Don't you quit." Mr. Biden told the crowd he was the only politician to have beaten Mr. Trump and promised to do it again in November.
I'm the nominee this point because 14 million Democrats like you voted for me in the primary. You may be the nominee, no one else, not the press, not the funds, not the insiders, not donors. You the voters, you decided, no one else, and I'm not going anywhere.
A growing number of fellow Democrats have called on the president to step aside from the contest. They say the 81 should make way for someone younger. 5 people linked to one of Ecuador's biggest criminal gangs have been convicted of the murder of the presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio nearly a year ago, Russia reports.
A court in Quito sentenced 2 senior members of the Los Lobos gang, Carlos Ángulo and Laura Castilla, to 34 years in prison as co-conspirators. 3 others were given 12-year sentences. More than 70 people gave evidence during the trial, including a key witness who said the gang had been offered $200,000 to kill Mr. Villavicencio. He was shot several times at the end of a rally in August last year. Mr. Villavicencio was a member of Congress and former journalist who spoke out against the increasing involvement of organized crime with politicians in Ecuador.
A US judge has dismissed the manslaughter case against the Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin in the fatal shooting on the set of the film Rust. The judge, Mary Marlowe Summer, that the state withheld a key piece of evidence about the live ammunition that killed the cinematographer Helena Hutchins in 2021.
This evidence is material. The late discovery of this evidence during trial has impeded the effective use of evidence in such a way that it has impacted the fundamental fairness of the proceedings. The defense is not in a position to test the state's theory as to the source of the live rounds of killing Ms. Hutchins. The state is highly culpable for its failure to provide this discovery to the defendant.
Irene Hutchins died after a revolver that Mr. Baldwin was holding went off during rehearsals. The actor wept when the judge threw out the case and cannot be tried again. 22 school children have been killed and more than 130 injured when a school building in central Nigeria collapsed. The two-story Saint Academy School in Jos, Plateau State, fell in on Friday as classes were in session and many pupils were taking exams. The cause of the collapse is not yet known. The state government has blamed the accident on the building's weak structure and the location. Live from London, this is the latest world news. Political parties in South Africa have called for an investigation into renewed allegations of corruption against the leader of the Economic Freedom Front, Julius Malema. Those demanding the police take action include the Democratic Alliance, which joined coalition government with the ANC last month. Mr. Malema has repeatedly denied wrongdoing, along with his deputy, who is also accused of receiving bribes. Pakistan has reached a deal with the International Monetary Fund for a $7 billion bailout. In return for the funds, Pakistan's government has promised to implement reforms and step up efforts to collect more tax. The country's debt crisis has been made worse by high inflation and a lack of foreign currency reserves. It was given a $3 billion emergency loan by the IMF last year. Elon Musk says he's looking forward to a battle in court with the European Union after it accused his social media firm X of breaching content rules. The Commission spokesman Thomas Rainey said the site's blue tick system was potentially deceiving users into thinking accounts with a tick next to their name were verified. In fact, anyone can pay for the symbol.
Les coches bleues ne doivent.
The blue check marks or account verification on X must not influence or manipulate users. Authenticity must therefore be verifiable and comply with regulations on digital services. Based on our preliminary analysis, this does not appear to be the case. Mr. Musk has accused Russians of censoring speech. Colombia's President Gustavo Petro has announced that Monday will be an official holiday across the country to celebrate the national football team's performance in the Copa America. Thanks to the current world champions Argentina in the final in Miami on Sunday. Mr. Petro said he was optimistic about winning, and added that whatever the result, Monday would be a day of celebrations. Colombia had only won the Copa America once as hosts in 2001.
This week, I was in Albania chatting to a local who was explaining that although his family had always made wine, there was a time under the communist regime where their land was taken away. And after communism, everyone was given back some land, not necessarily the same hectares they'd had before, and not so good for growing wine, mused my new friend sadly. In Albania, as in many communist countries of Eastern Europe, communism stopped people from developing land to the same extent. In certain places, attaining human freedoms turns out to have been a massive bonus for other species, especially trees, and the Iron Curtain has turned into something of a green belt. I'm Marnie Chesterton from the BBC World Service. This is Unexpected Elements. I am, as ever, joined by a global panel of journalists and experts, and in Madagascar, Christine Johannes joins us. Christine, welcome.
Salamat, Marnie.
Christine, what are you doing in Madagascar?
Let's just say I came to unwind and connect with myself on a solo trip of discovery. You know, culture, food, people, animals, and spices.
I guess we will expect some sort of supplementary noise in the background.
Oh, definitely, Marnie. I am in a very public place, so
Amazing.
About that.
Amazing.
Bear with me.
And in a less tropical climate, Morale Jamal joins us from Nunavut in Canada. Hey, Morale.
Hey, Marnie.
Oh, lovely to have you with us. So, this is the show that looks behind the news headlines for science to talk about and explore. And we start with one story and then we see how we go from there. Let's start with the story that we're going to frame the show around, and it's about a lack of
doing everything we have to do with we have a nose and all cat.
Was it true?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
President Biden has blamed his poor debate performance last week on jet lag, telling reporters that he wasn't very smart to travel around the world a couple of times before the debate.
Had a bad night. Bad night. The fact of the matter is that, I screwed up. I made a mistake.
Yes, during a debate at the end of June, President Joe Biden appeared to struggle against the Republican candidate Donald Trump, and commentators on both sides of the political divide agreed he did not come across well. And as you just heard, days later, the president made a statement claiming his performance was hindered by jet lag. So, our bags are packed, we have our boarding passes, I'm ready to take off on some science this story has inspired, although we will be avoiding the long haul flights in the short space of time at all costs because the environment, and also would definitely struggle to present this program.
I feel exactly the same, Marnie. And obviously, traveling is important when you're head of a country, but are all of these flights really necessary? Like, Biden said he traveled around the world a couple of times before the debate. Couldn't that have just been one trip?
Yeah, I think of that with a lot of our politicians, like the amount of time they spend travelling, and surely that means that you're constantly jet lagged.
Exactly, Marnie. So this kind of got me thinking about pointless flights in general, you know, a bit like meetings that could have been an email, or a trip to London which could have been a Zoom call, and I wanted to find the most pointless flight in the world, and in my opinion, the answer isn't the flight path of airline, but rather the flight path of a bird called the ancient murrelet.
Okay, why do they win the most pointless flight award?
Every year, these birds, like many others, migrate, but instead of migrating from north to south, they go from west to east.
Okay, so north to south is a seasonal thing, and a lot of birds migrate, they move during winter to somewhere more summery, but west to east doesn't work like that if you stay on the same latitude, right?
Exactly, Marnie. So from east to west or west to east, whichever way you're going, you're gonna have a pretty similar seasonal weather in both locations. A little bit like me with Madagascar and Ethiopia.
So Christine, like speaking of similar weather, where exactly are these birds flying to and from?
Great question, Meryl. So some of these ancient murrelets, they breed on an island called Haida Gwaii. It's just off the west coast of Canada and British Columbia. But in winter months, they're seen around countries like Japan, China, and Korea. So that's like an 8,000 kilometer trip twice every year for very similar climates.
So basically, and no disrespect to Canada, they could have just stayed in Canada and experienced a similar-ish winter.
Exactly. There are a few differences in rainfall levels, temperature, humidity, etc., but it isn't like a bird who flies south for the winter getting a completely different season, right?
Do we have any clue as to why?
It's still a bit of a mystery, but one of the theories behind why this bird makes this huge flights every year is down to their genetics. So when scientists looked at the ancient murrelet's DNA, they can see that the bird evolved in East Asia. So they think that even though these birds now live and breed in Canada, their genetics drive them to fly to their ancestral home every year.
Oh, I think that's lovely. The power of DNA. If mine were to do the same, I'd be walking probably a solid 2 weeks back to Scotland every year, which actually doesn't sound like the worst holiday. Well, thanks, Christine, for sharing the world's most pointless flight. Now, following Joe Biden blaming his performance in the recent presidential debate on jet lag, Harry and Noah from the Unexpected Elements team have been having a bit of a debate of their own.
Sorry. Excuse me. Sorry. Hey, amazing seats for the theatre now.
Hi, Harry. I was afraid you weren't going to make it.
Got caught up listening to Unexpected Elements, didn't I?
Shh. Looks like the show's about to begin.
Welcome to the Great Debate. Cast your mind back, the year 1920. Astronomers Harlow Shapley and Hebert Curtis meet to argue.
You know what? This was going to be about politics and the election.
Oh, it's the Great Debate, Harry. Over 100 years ago, two scientists battled it out to determine which one of them knew more about the size of the Milky Way.
The size of our galaxy. How disappointing.
No, it's fascinating. Not too long ago, we had hardly any idea what our galaxy was made up of.
And that resulted in a great debate.
Yes, at the time, balls of spinning gas had been observed in the night sky. Harlow thought these celestial objects could be found within our galaxy, whilst Huber thought they had to be further afield.
So, Herbert was right.
Yeah, but much of his argument was wrong.
Sounds pretty pointless if you ask me.
Are you kidding? Working off their theories, our views of our place in the universe began to shrink. In years to come, we would find that the universe is massive and continue to expand even to this day.
Thanks, guys. You just ruined the whole plot of the play. Beat it.
Come on, we can listen to Marty in the car on the way home.
Aww, I was looking forward to that.
Sorry. Enjoy the show.
Such poor theatre etiquette, but I mean, Harry and Noah, I'm flattered by your loyalty to Unexpected Elements. This week's Unexpected Elements has been inspired by a different debate, a Biden versus Trump showdown in the run-up to the US presidential election in November. And after struggling through some answers, President Biden blamed his performance on tiredness and jet lag following a few world trips in the weeks before. This has led us onto pointless flights, and we heard about one bird that makes a 16,000-kilometre round trip every year for no obvious reason, experiencing very similar weather to what it would if it stayed at home and put its wings up.
Speaking of useless journeys, the distance between Iqaluit, which is Nunavut's capital city, and Nuuk, which is Greenland's capital, is only about 825 kilometers. And up until June 26th of this year, there were no planes from Iqaluit to Nuuk, so the pointless flight of the Merlin reminded me of a pointless flight that I took from Nunavut to Greenland in 2022.
Yeah, go on.
So I was on a reporting trip, and my journey there involved a 3-hour flight to Ottawa, a 1-hour flight from there to Toronto. From Toronto, I boarded an 8-hour flight to Copenhagen, and then a 5-hour flight to Kangerlussuaq, which was the first city that I was landing in Greenland. And this flying time excludes layovers, which means that my total journey took 33 hours, and Kangerlussuaq wasn't even my last stop.
Okay, can I just say, as you were saying all of that, I've been following it on a map of the world, and you appear to have gone almost a complete circle. Massive amounts in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and all to be on an island from where we could actually see Canada in the distance.
This strikes me as an accessibility question, Meryl. So why is that important to you? I mean, I assume that historically these communities might have been quite well connected, seeing as they are so close to each other.
Yeah, so historically these communities were connected, but given that we are in the Arctic, we do tend to be cut off from the rest of the world. And for Inuit in Nunavut and in Greenland, there's a sense of camaraderie there because they are not only neighbors, they're essentially the same family and community of indigenous peoples.
Does anyone still travel across the ice between Greenland and Nunavut?
So barely anyone travels between Greenland and Nunavut on their own these days, and Inuit on both sides do keep their traditional modes of travel, such as dog sleds and kayaks, which Inuit actually invented, alive, though they don't use it the same way. Climate change is both reducing the thickness and the duration of the sea ice necessary for sled travel, as well as making the waters choppier and more inconsistent.
Morale, when I was in Greenland a couple of years ago, I'd assumed that everyone there would love the summer rather than the winter because, more daylight. But actually, they told me that winter is way more sociable because when the fjords freeze up, you can easily just drive across them. They're like roads to go and see your neighbours on the other side.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, even in Italy, the community comes alive in the winter. There's just so much more going on, and it's interesting again because we're so isolated that people have a better time socializing, going between communities and feeling like you're cut off from the rest of the world, but totally connected here.
Thanks, Morale. And listeners, I want your epically pointless journey stories, please. Or can you beat Morale for a trip where you had to go the long way round? Let us know on email, unexpected@bbc.co.uk, or WhatsApp, +44 330 678 3080. Still to come, how would you cope on a single flight lasting 20 hours? Or, maybe more importantly, how would your body cope when you touch down in completely the wrong time zone? That's coming up after this.
Hello, it's Quizman Dan here, back to put your unexpected science knowledge to the test in our weekly quiz question. This week we've been looking at Joe Biden's comments that tiredness played a big role in his performance in the recent US presidential debate. So we thought we'd ask you about someone with an even better excuse for feeling a bit sluggish, Robert McDonald, who holds the record for the longest time spent without sleeping. What we want to know is just how long he stayed awake for. A, 291 hours, B, 453 hours, or C, 719 hours. So how long did record holder Robert McDonald go without sleeping? A, 291 hours, B, 453 hours, or C, 719 hours? We'll be back with the answer later on.
You're listening to Unexpected Elements from the BBC World Service. So far, we've been talking about presidential jet lag, bizarre migrations, and taking the long way round. So I think we've established that travelling takes its toll. And I wanted to talk to someone who knows a thing or two about it. Rosemary Brown is an associate professor at Northwestern University who's looked into how we might be able to prevent jet lag, and she joins me now. Hello, Rosemary.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So you've been putting this into practice, maybe? I don't know, you're just back from a long haul flight, aren't you?
I am. I returned on Sunday from a trip to Korea, and so I am experiencing jet lag as we speak.
So, commiseration, you sound great. What inspired you to start looking at what we can do about jet lag?
I've been involved in researching sleep and circadian rhythms for a number of years, and jet lag is something that I experience, that my students experience, that we all experience whenever we travel, and it's such a universal human thing that we were inspired to see whether the tools and techniques that we developed in our lab could maybe be used to address this problem that so many people face.
So what kind of tools and techniques?
So my lab develops mathematical and computational models of sleep and circadian rhythms, and by using those computational models we can derive predictions that might be able to put into practice that can help people we think recover from jet lag a little bit faster.
Okay, so if you've got a model, presumably you need to feed data into that. So what kind of things go into it?
So the models that we developed, some of them are based on actigraphy data and blood draw data that we have from human subjects who participate in the studies that my clinical collaborators carry out. Others are purely mathematically derived. At this point, we know a fair bit about how the circadian system is organized, and we can use those scientific insights to develop mathematical models. The ones that we've done for jet lag are based on coupled oscillator models. So the idea is that you have a clock in your brain, and there are other clocks in your body, in your gut, and in other tissues. And the question is, how can we model how those clocks all talk to one another and respond to different cues as you recover from jet lag?
Okay, and we do know a few of the cues, right? So noise, maybe?
Yeah, so light is the biggest one, right? So light can reset your clock. It's important when you travel to a new time zone to get in the morning, that's when you are the most sensitive to the light cues, and to be sure to put your phone away at night so that you're not giving yourself a light cue at the time that you're supposed to be sleeping. But food can also be a powerful and training signal. And so recent evidence from experimental studies in model organisms like mice and rats suggests that food can reset the clock. And so what we wanted to do was to model the interplay of light and food to see whether you could tune your meal schedule to help you recover from jet lag.
Wait, so that means that when you're on the plane, you have a choice when they come round with all of the aeroplane food?
Well, on the plane itself, it's a little hard to control that because they, of course, have to keep to their schedule in order to be safe for the flight. But once you land, you have a good bit of control about when you eat. What our model suggests is that it is best when you first land in the new time zone to start eating according to that time zone, and ideally to have a big breakfast in the time of that new time zone to kind of force yourself to attune to that new time more rapidly.
What happens if you don't land in your new time zone at a place that is breakfast time?
So hold on and wait until morning and then have breakfast. Obviously don't starve yourself, right? So if you're hungry, please do eat something. But the idea is to really have your big meals first thing in the morning, according to our predictions.
It's interesting because flight times are changing and it looks like they're getting longer. So for example, the flights from London to Sydney, so around the world, that used to be something where you break the journey halfway. Now they're talking about, oh no, in the next couple of years you can do one continuous non-stop flight from London to Sydney. Is there any science on how to help a passenger on that flight avoid jet lag?
The main contributor to jet lag is the number of time zones that you've traveled, not necessarily the way in which you've gotten there. So whether it's a flight that's direct from Dallas to Sydney versus a flight that has a stopover in, say, Honolulu, the effect of the jet lag is going to be about the same because you're still having traveled, 13 hours of a time zone difference. The fact that you've done it a little bit more quickly might make the jet lag slightly more acute at the very beginning, but really that effect is going to be negligible compared to the simple fact of the time zone difference.
I'm really curious, Rosemary. I know you said that the length of time doesn't really affect your rhythm. I'm kind of wondering if you've been able to put all of this theory into practice during your own trips.
Oh yeah, so my own trips, I do try to follow the recommendations of our own models. So I've been trying to get light in the morning, which fortunately here it's summertime, so that's quite easy to do. And also having a big meal. I am not as good about putting my phone away at night, I will admit that. And so that's something that I and I think many of us can do better.
I'm just wondering, is anyone thinking about sort of factoring in optimum flights or adjusting flight lengths and time zones in order to lessen jet lag?
I think the one thing that people have been thinking about and looking at is changing the lighting on the aircraft itself. And so having that be bluer or redder or dimmer at appropriate times in the flight is something that airlines really could do. This question of how do you adjust the lighting has been looked at in other ways. I have colleagues who have been also working with hospitals to optimize lighting environments so that patients in hospital are being exposed to light that will enhance their circadian rhythms rather than interfere with them. But basically in any sort of institutional setting, whether that's a hospital or whether that's the inside of an aircraft, changing the color and the intensity of light can help.
Right, and presumably there are implications not just for people getting on planes, but increasingly society is 24/7 and a lot of people work shifts at night time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is a critical thing for them as well. In fact, the jet lag studies that we've done have now been a foray into trying to understand how people's sleep and circadian rhythms are impacted by shift work and how changing things like their meal schedule or their exposure to light with artificial lights might be able to help that. And so these same mathematical models that we've been applying to understand jet lag, we've also now started to apply to understand shift work. This is actually a pretty big deal. In the United States, about 20% of the workforce works a shift work schedule, and so it can have a huge impact on public health.
Rosemary Brown, thank you so much for joining us and sharing the science of jet lag and circadian rhythms. So, from a presidential debate performance plagued by a supposed bad case of jet lag, we've travelled across the Pacific on the wings of the ancient Murrelet in a migration mystery. We've heard how traditional ways of travel between Nunavut and Greenland are under threat due to melting sea ice, and how future 20-hour flights might be designed with our biology in mind, although some will argue that we shouldn't really be getting on planes so much anyway. Still to come in the show, all of this talk of air travel leads seamlessly to the question of which animal has the worst carbon footprint. And moving from animals to moving land, or at least the rights to it, we talk Nunavut Day. And is the grass always greener? I explore the science that goes into achieving the perfect football or tennis pitch.
This is the BBC World Service, talking with Kevin Kwan about his internationally best-selling novel, Crazy Rich Asians.
I have no idea who these people are, but I can tell you one thing. These people are richer than God. This is satire, and I am poking fun at these people and all the endless name dropping, so I feel like the reader's in on the joke.
What is the most bizarre detail included in the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy that is a true fact?
We have a character that has a fish that goes for a facelift.
My jaw has dropped. I love the role that art, fashion, and design plays in the books.
I've always followed amazing artisans that create the finest things in the world. It's always been a fascination to me. And of course, I was very much inspired by one of my favorite books of all time, Pride and Prejudice.
World Book Club at bbcworldservice.com/World Book Club or wherever you get your BBC podcasts.
Coming up after the news, Unexpected Elements returns with the questions the news won't answer, like which animal has the worst carbon footprint? And from moving animals to moving land, or at least the rights to it, we talk Nunavut Day. Also, is the grass always greener? I gatecrash the Wimbledon tennis tournament to ask about the science of the perfect football pitch. That's all coming up.
BBC News with David. President Biden has given a fiery speech at a rally in the US state of Michigan, telling supporters he'll beat Donald Trump again in November's election. Mr. Biden has faced growing calls from within his own party to step aside and make way for someone younger. The crowd in Michigan chanted, "Don't you quit," and 4 more years. 5 people have been given sentences of up to 34 years for the assassination of Ecuadorian presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio last August, and include 2 senior members of the powerful criminal gang Los Lobos. A US judge has dismissed the manslaughter case against the actor Alec Baldwin. His lawyers had accused prosecutors of withholding evidence about a box of bullets that contained both live and dummy rounds. The cinematographer Helena Hutchins was shot dead on the set of Mr. Baldwin's film Rust 3 years ago, when the gun dropped from the actor's hands. Police in central Nigeria say 22 people died after car collapse on Friday. Crowds have been featured for survivors in the Plateau state. Pakistan has agreed a $7 billion bailout with the International Monetary Fund. In return, the government has promised to implement reforms and step up efforts to collect more tax. Elon Musk says he'll take the European Union to court after it accused its social media firm X of breaching online content laws. The block's tech regulator said X's blue tick system could trick users into thinking accounts were verified. The remains of a 19th century explorer credited with mapping and naming Australia will be reburied in his home village in Britain today. The grave of Captain Matthew Flinders is thought to be lost to history. Its next discovered during construction work in London 5 years ago. Colombia's President Gustavo Petro has announced that Monday will be an official holiday across the country, following the national football team's performance in the Copa America. That's the latest BBC News.
This is Unexpected Elements from the BBC World Service. I'm Marnie Chesterton in Cardiff in the UK, and with me today are From the island of Madagascar, we have.
It's Christine Johannes.
And from northern Canada in Nunavut,
It's Miral Jamal. Hi.
so, the Unexpected Elements team normally scour the headlines looking for science stories that they can find there, and sometimes these are hidden and that's big in one part of the world, but not really beyond that. And this is the part of the show where we set that story travelling in the most environmentally friendly and jet lag free way via the airwaves. We call it Under the Radar. Morale, what have you got?
So, Marnie, earlier this week we had a very special celebration in Nunavut for what we know as Nunavut Day, and we celebrated it on July 9th.
Ah, happy Nunavut Day. What does that actually mean?
Yes, so Nunavut Day marks the official birth of Nunavut, which is Canada's youngest territory, and it's the day when the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement was signed in 1993. And this is important because it's by far the largest of 4 land claim agreements reached between the Canadian government and the Inuit. And this year, Nunavut Day was also super special because, firstly, it's 25 years since the territory was created, and secondly, it's the year that the government here signed the devolution agreement with the federal government. I know too many governments. It's considered to be the largest land transfer in Canadian history.
And Moral, the devolution agreement was signed this year?
Yeah, so just to break down the agreement a bit more, devolution is essentially the process by which the federal government here, essentially thought of as the colonial government, hands back power to the indigenous people who are the occupants of these lands.
Okay, that's big because I know that there are a lot of natural resources, and am I right in thinking that in the past it's been more of a kind of free-for-all?
Yeah, so just to again explain the size of Nunavut, it's over 2 million square kilometers and very rich in natural resources and very, very underexplored because it is one of the newest territories in the country. And I should say that it's also very mineral rich. For example, a couple of years ago in the neighboring community to Iqaluit in Kimirut, folks just found sapphires just casually walking about in the community. While certain agreements exist or have existed between Inuit communities and mining companies, there's been a larger oversight by the federal government so far, and devolution would change the power dynamics and the authority of who makes the final decision, giving Inuit the opportunity to do that. So this means that the government of Nunavut will have a say in all the land, water, and resource management.
Can I just say on behalf of both of us to Morale that Christine and I both like sapphires, so if you come across a pile of them, Morale, then, you know.
Yeah, I will think of you, will I reach out? Sorry.
Coming back to it, I am really curious. What would you tend to get up to on Nunavut Day?
Yeah, so this year and previous years, there's a community barbecue, there's live music, there's a lot of gifts and prizes to be won locally, and it really is special, like, you know, hearing music by Inuit and just sharing food in community is how usually most celebrations go here.
Nice. My parents' village has just had its annual celebration where everyone dresses up in medieval costume to celebrate or commemorate when all the Christian pilgrims travelled through the village about 600-700 years ago, which sounds like it's some ancient tradition, but it was actually made up about 100 years ago by a local author who thought that there really wasn't enough dressing up going on.
I support that.
So that was our Under the Radar, and we were talking about national customs on special days, and if listeners do have any that they want to share, it's probably one of my favourite things to read about. I don't know, so there's one in Germany where if you wear a tie on a certain day, people with scissors will cut it off. If there's anything like that you'd like to share with the Unexpected Elements team, the email to get in touch is unexpected@bbc.co.uk, or our WhatsApp number for voice notes and for texts is +44 330 678 1380. Now, you will have heard the call-outs because we do love it when you get in touch with your emails and WhatsApps and postcards. And this week, we've had one about Vanta Black, which is the blackest black, supposedly the darkest paint-like coating that you can get your hands on. And Morale, can you read this email?
For sure. This has come from Lars. Dear Marnie and Unexpected Elements team, in your episode Lights Out, you mentioned dark black colors like Vanta Black. This reminded me of my work as a physics PhD student in a laser lab in Germany. We used beam blocks or beam dumps to block the near-infrared pulse laser beams. These beam blocks were made of stacks of razor blades about 2 centimeters high. The laser beam hits the thin razor blades and gets reflected in between adjacent blades many times and thus absorbed. I always found it so cool that when you look at the stack of blades head on, they do not look metallic at all, but just pure black because they trapped all incoming light so well. All the best, Lars from Zurich, Switzerland.
Oh, thank you, Lars. And thank you, Morale, for reading that. And you were on the programme when we were talking Vanta Black last time, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
And I remember calling you a menace because you said if you got hold of this paint, you'd paint the street with Vanta Black so people would think they were falling in a massive hole.
Yeah, I feel like you actually put out like a public kind of warning because I will still do that if it does happen. If I get my hands on Vanta Black paint, it is happening.
I don't know if we had time to talk about it, but there was an artist called Anish Kapoor who patented the blackest black and said only I am allowed to use this black. And so other people were inspired to try and invent something that was even less reflective, even blacker, in order to get around the patent. And I enjoyed that. Science inspired by pettiness. Now, back to our listener emails. We got one last week when we talked about earworms. I say we, I was on holiday in Albania. Alex Lathbridge was left trying to explain what earworms are without using any music because we can't because of the copyright. I think we did have to sing. Anyway, for those who missed it, an earworm is a song that you can't stop thinking about, even when you want to. And I'm aware that this is probably a dangerous thing to ask because earworms can be transmitted via the airwaves. But, Christine, have you had any earworms dancing around in your head recently?
You know, Marnie, mine is always the same culprit. It's always Sweet Disposition by the Tucker Track. I don't know why I haven't been able to get this out of my head since about 2012.
Morale, have you got one?
Not recently, no, but every time I come across like a TikTok that's super catchy, it gets stuck, and then I kind of have to just log off for some time and get over it.
So I mention this because we've had contact from Heidi who writes about the earworms. I get them regularly, and when I'm feeling good, I can switch them like in a jukebox when I've listened enough to one song. But when I'm stressed, the tune sticks in my head. And when I'm really stressed out, the piece that is in the loop gets shorter and shorter. Then trying to switch to another song doesn't help because it comes back until I do something about my stress. So earworms are a good indicator for my well-being. Bye-bye, Heidi. Isn't that great? I love that she's analysed what her earworms mean about her well-being. The longer the loop, the better the well-being, I guess. Has anyone had that?
That is very intriguing. I don't know what my 12 years mean at this point, but I should probably start analyzing it too.
I think it's that it's got a really strong ecological niche in your head and it's not going anywhere. You're going to be singing that on your deathbed. Moving, I guess, swiftly on so that you can try and think of other thoughts that aren't that. Christine, could you read this email?
Of course, Marnie. So it says, "Hi there. I've been listening to BBC World Service since the late 60s, so about 55 years. I'm 79 years old now. When I count, I see in my head a pattern from 1 to 10. The same pattern repeated from 10 to 20 and 20 to 30, etc. Both my brothers see each number as a color. Is there a name for this phenomenon? If so, what is it, and does it serve any purpose?" Adrian Bonsanger.
I do know that there is a name for seeing numbers as colours, and it's called synesthesia. Have either of you come across this?
I have heard this before.
Mirella, do you know what it is? It's a neurological phenomenon where you kind of blend the senses. So, number colour synesthesia, you see the numbers, so 6 will always be green or whatever the link is in your head. Is that something, Morale, that you've seen before?
Well, Marnie, if I can recall, there is an Unexpected Elements episode that I was on with information on synesthesia. I haven't personally experienced it, but a lot of creative people do, and I'm pretty sure a musician that I generally listen to, Ward, has synesthesia as well, and considers it to be making her music better.
Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that. I do know that Claudia Hammond, talking of creative, wonderful people, World Service presenter of Health Check, she gets synesthesia, and for her, days of the week have colours. So she doesn't get a blue Monday, because Mondays for her are always green. Does anyone else out there hear words as colours? Do let me know. I want to know what's going on in your head. The email address is unexpected@bbc.co.uk, and our WhatsApp number is +44 330 678 3080. Still to come, the animal with the biggest carbon footprint. Is it us? It's probably us. Well, stay tuned to find out. That's after this.
It's Quizman Dan here, back to reveal the answer to this week's Unexpected Elements quiz question. Earlier, we asked you about Robert McDonald and just how long the record holder for the longest time spent awake had gone without sleeping. A. 291 hours, B. 453 hours, or C. 719 hours? Well, we can tell you the answer is B. Robert McDonald stayed awake for more than 453 hours, or just under 19 days. He broke the record in 1986, and while he didn't appear to suffer any long-lasting effects, the organisation Guinness World Records later decided to stop monitoring the record because of the inherent dangers associated with sleep deprivation. Very well done if you got that right, and if you didn't, we hope it doesn't give you any sleepless nights.
Every week we get lots of interesting emails and texts from all of you lot listening, and sometimes we'll get a question that puts our brains to work. It is time for Ask the Unexpected, and this week we've had a question from Matthew, who asks, which animal has the worst carbon footprint? This caused a bit of a stink in the office as everyone thought about it, but we found someone who can give us an answer.
My name is Guillermo Pardo, and I work at the Basque Center of Climate Change, which is in the north of Spain.
Okay, and this is what Dr. Pardo had to say.
If I assume that Matthew is asking about which animal emits more greenhouse gases, myself would go for a herbivore. When herbivores digest the grass that they eat, they emit methane, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas. And the amount emitted will depend mainly on the size of the animal, but also on the type of the digestive system that they have. So in this case, ruminants have a very complex digestive system that tend to emit quite a lot of methane. But here comes a small plot twist in this answer, because Matthew said carbon footprint, and all this methane emitted by wild animals is not contributing to climate change. So in the same way that we humans and all animals, for example, we emit carbon dioxide when we breathe. Carbon dioxide is the main greenhouse gas, but when we emit it through our respiration, it's just part of the natural cycle of carbon. And this process is not adding new carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So this is not really increasing carbon dioxide concentration and it's not affecting climate change. So something similar happened with wild herring. The methane that they produce through the digestion is considered part of the natural cycles of those ecosystems. So they are not adding new methane into the atmosphere.
Thank you to Matthew for the question and Guillermo Pardo for that answer. So this question, like I said, has provoked quite the debate in the science unit. So if I'm allowed, I'm going to dig into this some more in detail, especially crowd science. And I'm sure if we find out anything extra, we'll be back with fuller answers when we get them. In the meantime, if you have a question and search engines of the world aren't giving you answers, why not try us? The email address, which you should know by now, is unexpected@bbc.co.uk. And finally, I get a free pick from the week's news events. So if you read through a newspaper from start to finish, the back pages are always the sport. And so this week, Unexpected Elements is going to follow the same established order for the science that we find behind the news. So for those of you who like your sport, it's Wimbledon Tennis Championship and International Football Tournament, the Euros, at the moment, and they're hitting the sporting headlines. So, team, what do you think would link tennis to football to science? Morale?
Oh, something about the competitiveness of humans and what that says about how we're built, our physiology, maybe our mental capacity. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that actually, now that you say all of that, that sounds really plausible. But the answer that I'm going for is the grass they play on. And yesterday, I took a trip to Wimbledon to the iconic centre court to meet the scientists who make sure that the grass, and bearing in mind this is a living, breathing surface, is the perfect game of tennis to have a tournament.
If I went and danced on that grass, what would happen?
Well, if you look around all the security guards, you'll probably get wrestled to the ground and carried out probably by gate 5 and never to be seen again.
That failed threat was from Neil Stubley, the man in charge of growing Wimbledon's courts. So yes, this surface is so precious that I wasn't even allowed to stand. Neil is serious about making this grass the best it can be.
We all have to, even though each championship is successful, we kind of always looking for that extra 1% and that sort of 1% gain, and most of that is driven by the technology and the science that helps deliver a natural growing surface.
Okay, because what we're looking at in front of us is living, breathing, but also needs to be consistently the same. So I'm wondering about your day-to-day work. I mean, for example, the noise that people might be able to hear. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fans at either end of the court. Are they hair drying the grass?
Essentially, yes. So when we take the covers off in the morning, there's a dew that's formed underneath the cover. We just need to make sure that we can dry the surface as quickly as possible for when the mowers and the markers come out to do all the work. So on the outside courts, you've got that natural airflow. In the stadiums, we've got obviously like the high walls. It's just a little bit more restricted with airflow, so we create that. So we're kind of trying to recreate the same atmosphere in the stadiums as we have on the outside courts.
And you say the mowers come out. Do you have to mow this grass every day?
Every day, every morning, the teams will go out and they will cut all the grass courts. We have the same fleet of mowers. Our mechanics will check the height of cut and the fact that they are on cut every day and just make sure that they are at championship height. All the teams will go out and they'll cut all the courts every morning. The lines will be repainted, and then we'll go out with our agronomy team and we'll start measuring all the different parts of and all the different aspects of what we expect from the tennis court. So it will be hardness reading,